Welcome to the Unseen YouTube channel. This video is about the Russian Mafia. Russian organized crime or Russian Mafia is a collective of various organized crime elements originating in the former Soviet Union. The initialism OPG is Organized Criminal Group, used to refer to any of the Russian Mafia groups, sometimes modified with a specific name. Sometimes the initialism is translated and OCG is used. Organized crime in Russia began in the Russian Empire, but it was not until the Soviet era that Voryevy Zakon emerged as leaders of prison groups in forced labor camps, and their honor code became more defined. With the end of World War II, the death of Joseph Stalin, and the fall of the Soviet Union, more gangs emerged in a flourishing black market, exploiting the unstable governments of the former republics. Louis Freeh, former director of the FBI, said that the Russian Mafia posed the greatest threat to US national security in the mid-1990s. In 2012, there were as many as 6,000 groups with more than 200 of them having a global reach. Criminals of these various groups are either former prison members, corrupt officials and business leaders, people with ethnic ties, or people from the same region with shared criminal experiences and leaders. Clarification needed. In December 2009. Timur Lakhonin, the head of the Russian National Central Bureau of Interpol, stated, "Certainly, there is crime involving our former compatriots abroad, but there is no data suggesting that an organized structure of criminal groups comprising former Russians exists abroad." While in August 2010, Alain Bauer, a French criminologist, said that it is one of the best structured criminal organizations in Europe, with a quasi-military operation. Since the 1980s, the Russian Mafia has been among the most powerful, dangerous and feared criminal organizations in the world, and as of 2022, the organization remains to be among the world's largest, deadliest and most powerful crime syndicates. The FBI has called them a criminal superpower. The Russian criminality can be traced back to Russia's imperial period, which began in the 1720s, in the form of banditry and thievery. Most of the population were peasants, in poverty at the time, and criminals who stole from government entities and divided profits among the people earned Robin Hood-like status, being viewed as protectors of the poor and becoming folk heroes. In time, the Vorovskoy era emerged as these criminals grouped and started their own code of conduct that was based on strict loyalty with one another and opposition against the government. In 2009, FBI agents in Moscow targeted 2 suspected mafia leaders and 2 other corrupt businessmen. One of the leaders is Yevgeny Dvoskin, a criminal who had been in prison with Ivankov in 1995 and was deported in 2001 for breaking immigration regulations. The other is Konstantin Ginsburg, who was reportedly the current big boss of Russian organized crime in America before his reported assassination in 2009. It being suspected that Ivankov handed over control to him. In the same year, Semyon Mogilevich was placed on the FBI 10 most wanted fugitives list for his involvement in a complex multimillion-dollar scheme that defrauded investors in the stock of his company YBM Magnex International, swindling them out of $150 million. He was indicted in 2003 and arrested in 2008 in Russia on tax fraud charges. But because the US does not have an extradition treaty with Russia, he was released on bail. Monia Elson said, in 1998, that Mogilevich is the most powerful mobster in the world. Around the world, Russian mafia groups have popped up as dominating areas. Russian organized crime has a rather large stronghold in the city of Atlanta where members are distinguished by their tattoos. Russian organized crime was reported to have a stronger grip in the French Riviera region and Spain in 2010, and Russia was branded as a virtual mafia state according to the WikiLeaks cables. In 2009, Russian mafia groups had been said to reach over 50 countries and, in 2010, had up to 300,000 members. According to recordings released in 2015, Alexander Litvinenko, shortly before he was assassinated, claimed that Semyon Mogilevich has had a good relationship with Vladimir Putin since the 1990s. Joseph Stalin was a crime boss and gangster during the early 1900s. Amid growing violence, Stalin formed his own armed red battle squads. They raised funds through a protection racket on large local businesses and mines. Stalin also established a small group which he called the Bolshevik Expropriators Club, although it would more widely be known as the group or outfit, containing about 10 members, 3 of whom were women. The group procured arms, facilitated prison escapes, raided banks, and executed traitors. When the Bolshevik Revolution came around in 1917, the thieves' world was alive and active. Vladimir Lenin attempted to wipe them out, but it failed, and the criminals survived into Joseph Stalin's reign. During Stalin's reign as ruler, millions of people were sent to gulags, Soviet labor camps, where powerful criminals worked their way up to become vorami zakon. These criminal elites often conveyed their status through complicated tattoos, symbols still used by Russian mobsters. After Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union during World War II, Stalin was recruiting more men to fight for the nation, offering prisoners freedom if they joined the army. Many flocked to help in the war, but this act betrayed the codes of the thieves' world that one must not ally with the government. Those who chose not to fight in the war referred to the traitors as suka, and the traitors landed at the bottom of the hierarchy. Outcast. The Suki separated from the others and formed their own groups and power bases by collaborating with prison officials, eventually gaining the luxury of comfortable positions. Bitterness between the groups erupted into a series of bitch wars from 1945 to 1953 with men killed every day. The prison officials encouraged the violence, seeing it to rid the prisons of criminals. When the USSR collapsed and a free market economy emerged, organized criminal groups began to take over Russia's economy, with many ex-KGB agents and veterans of the Afghan war offering their skills to the crime bosses. Gangster summit meetings had taken place in hotels and restaurants shortly before the Soviets' dissolution, so that top Vori zakon could agree on who would rule what and set plans on how to take over the post-communist states. The discussion notes that Russian mobsters now operate in more than 50 countries around the world. Their background in a totalitarian country with widespread corruption has resulted in their development of a unique business acumen. 30 Russian crime syndicates operate in at least 17 cities in the United States. In addition, both the Bush and the Clinton administrations have unwittingly facilitated the Russian mob and the untrammeled corruption of Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union. In early 1993, the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs reported there were over 5,000 organized crime groups operating in Russia. These groups had an estimated 100,000 members with a leadership of 18,000. Although Russian authorities have currently identified over 5,000 criminal groups in that country, Russian officials believe that only approximately 300 of those have some identifiable structure. 11 organized crime groups in Russia are not nearly as structured as those in the US, such as the LCN. It was the period of internationalization of Russian organized crime. It was agreed that Vyacheslav Yaponchik Ivankov would be sent to Brighton Beach in 1992, allegedly because he was killing too many people in Russia and also to take control of Russian organized crime in North America. Within a year, he built an international operation that included, but was not limited to, narcotics, money laundering, and prostitution, and made ties with the American Mafia and Colombian drug cartels, eventually extending to Miami, Los Angeles, and Boston. 9. Those who went against him were usually killed. Prior to Ivankov's arrival, Bill Aguilar's downfall left a void for America's next Vori zakon. Monia Elson, leader of Monia's Brigada, a gang that similarly operated from Russia to Los Angeles to New York, was in a feud with Boris Nayfeld, with bodies dropping on both sides. Ivankov's arrival virtually ended the feud, although Elson would later challenge his power as well, and a few attempts were made to end the former's life. Nayfield and Elson would eventually be arrested in January 1994 and in Italy in 1995, respectively. According to FBI reports, the crime boss Semyon Mogilevich had alliances with the Camorra, with Salvatore Di Falco, a lower echelon member of the Giuliano clan. Mogilevich and Di Falco would have held meetings in Prague in 1993. Semyon Mogilevich's net worth is estimated to be $10 billion. As the 21st century dawned, the Russian Mafia remained after the death of Aslan Yusoyan. New Mafia bosses sprang up, while imprisoned ones were released. Among the released were Marat Palagula and Vyacheslav Ivankov. both in 2004. The latter was extradited to Russia but was jailed once more for his alleged murders of 2 Turks in a Moscow restaurant in 1992. He was cleared of all charges and released in 2005. 4 years later, he was assassinated by a shot in the stomach from a sniper. Meanwhile, Bonia Elson and Leonid Reutemann were arrested in March 2006 for an unsuccessful murder plot against 2 Kyiv-based businessmen. In 2009, FBI agents in Moscow targeted 2 suspected mafia leaders and 2 other corrupt businessmen. One of the leaders is Yevgeny Dvoskin, a criminal who had been in prison with Ivankov in 1995 and was deported in 2001 for breaking immigration regulations. The other is Konstantin Ginsburg, who was reportedly the current big boss of Russian organized crime in America before his reported assassination in 2009. It being suspected that Ivankov handed over control to him. Please make sure that you like the video and subscribe to our channel.